And there was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. Then Pharaoh called to Moses and said, "Go, serve the Lord, only let your flocks and your herds be kept back. Let your little ones also go with you." But Moses said, "You must also give us sacrifices and burnt offerings, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. Our livestock shall go with us, not a hoof shall be left behind, for we must take some of them to serve the Lord our God, and even when we do not know with what we must serve the Lord until we arrive there." We'll conclude our reading at this point. The book of Exodus, chapter 10.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hi, this is Jeff Shapiro, and for the next half hour, I'll be reading from the February 19th, 2026 issue of the Challenger Community News and the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Registration is now open for the Upstate New York MWBE Conference in 2026. The fourth annual Upstate MWBE Conference kicks off at 1 p.m. on Monday, March 30th, with an afternoon workshop, an evening jazz reception, and an awards dinner with a keynote speaker. It continues from 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Tuesday, March 31st, with morning and afternoon training tracks and a luncheon with a guest speaker. It concludes with a full day, 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Wednesday, April 1st, with panel discussions, a networking luncheon, and an MWBE Expo. The Upstate New York MWBE Conference is more than an event. It brings together players and partners that help MWBEs grow their business and create jobs, said Mayor Evans. If you are a minority or women-owned business, you will not want to miss this year's conference. I encourage you to register today to access real opportunities that will help build and expand your business. MWBE, also it's known as the Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprises, is a federal program administered by state and local governments to help minority and women-owned businesses overcome racial and structural barriers to securing government contracts for goods and services. Get your tickets online at www.cityofrochester.gov/departments/finance department/upstate New York MWBE Conference. Taste of the NFL. Taste of the NFL is the must-attend Super Bowl weekend event. The satiating culmination of flavor, food, fans, friends, family, and football delivers the right spice before the big game. Celebrity chef Carla Hall, pictured in addition to Rashida Perry and Andrew Zimmern, were three of the celebrity chefs sprinkled throughout the pop-up kitchens to mingle, share recipes, rally support, and serve photo ops. I clearly did not get the memo. Do not eat before the taste of the NFL. 20 minutes in, and I could not ingest another thing. I stuffed myself on a Tostito concoction that fused sweet potato, corn, and seafood. Swallowed confit of pork on a sweet corn, croquet, and bourbon barbecued. And I just could not say no to Posted Negro Bites, a.k.a. short rib lion's Maine mushroom. A foodie like me would never fumble lobster. I then wobbled into the end zone with a spoonful of the best lobster-filled seafood stew that my taste buds had ever embraced. The Super Bowl and chicken wings are like peanut butter and jelly. Cannot have one without the other. Pass me a crispy sesame chicken wing. Beyond food and fun, Taste of the NFL is a party with a purpose. It was established in 1992 to raise awareness and funds to address hunger and food insecurity. Did you know that 1 in 5 children experience food insecurity? Meaning, children affected by food insecurity do not have access to enough food or food of decent quality to meet one's basic needs. Proceeds from Taste of NFL provide schools nationwide with the resources needed to deliver and distribute meals to at-risk students. If you plan to attend Super Bowl 2027, please make space to help the NFL maintain their 30-plus year streak of tackling hunger among children with your purchase of a ticket to Taste of NFL. This was submitted by Nurse Bowick, BSN, RN. ROC Youth Employment Network applications are now open, offering summer work experience to ages 14 to 20. The City of Rochester and Monroe County invite area youth ages 14 through 20 to apply for the summer work experience through the ROC Youth Employment Network now through Friday, April 17th. Administered in partnership with Rochester Works, the program offers 6 to 8 weeks of paid internships for youth who are currently enrolled in middle school or high school, or who are actively pursuing their high school equivalency diploma, and who are at least 14 years old at the time of their application. Program participants learn skills that prepare them for the workforce and economic success. Past participating employers have included the City of Rochester, community organizations, colleges, and local businesses. The application process requires you to submit the following documents digitally prior to the April 17th deadline: a work permit, a social security card, the most recent school report card, and official ID, such as a school ID or a driver's license, a non-driver ID, or a safe child ID. To apply or learn more, visit www.rocyouthemployment.com or call the ROC Youth Employment Hotline at 585-428-6366. Antoine Thompson announces his campaign for Maryland State Delegate. Former Buffalo City Council member and New York State Senator Antoine Thompson, a nationally recognized leader in environmental justice, clean energy, housing, and urban policy, recently announced the official launch of his campaign for Maryland State Delegate in District 25. Thompson currently serves as Executive Director of the Greater Washington Region Clean Cities Coalition, known as the GWRCC, which is a public-private partnership dedicated to expanding the use of clean, American-made transportation fuels in order to strengthen homeland security, improve air quality, and advance environmental justice, diversity, and inclusion. Previously, Thompson served as Executive Director of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, the nation's oldest organization of African American real estate professionals, where he led national efforts to expand access to home ownership, address the racial wealth gap, and promote fair housing policy. As a side note, I was a teacher in the Buffalo City school system, and Antoine was one of my students. Fight to keep racist killers' death penalty trial in Buffalo continues. Last Friday morning, U.S. District Judge Lawrence Filardo ruled that the death penalty trial for Peyton Gendron would not be held in New York City as his defense attorneys wanted. "We're not going to New York City," the judge declared. On May 14, 2022, Gendron, a self-described white supremacist, carried out the racially motivated massacre of 10 black people at the Jefferson Avenue Tops Market. The ruling last week was a much-appreciated victory for family members of victims who lost their lives in the massacre. But as the saying goes, it ain't over till it's over. There's still a possibility the trial will be held outside of Buffalo, in the city of Rochester, some 73 miles away. Genron's attorneys want the trial moved because they argued he cannot get a fair trial in Buffalo because of the demographics, black population, and the number of African Americans that may end up on the jury. They also argued that overwhelming amount of pretrial publicity would impact the case. Assistant U.S. Attorney Joseph Trippi argued vehemently against moving the case out of Buffalo, citing the gross inconvenience it would cause the families of the victims who would want to attend the trial. Judge Villardo gave attorneys 2 weeks to file written arguments on the venue/location issue. The judge set the trial date for no later than October 13th, a date that he hopes is final. I'm very opposed to putting off this trial date, he said. Genron, who is currently incarcerated, has already been sentenced to life in prison. In 2024, the Justice Department announced it will seek the death penalty. Families of the victims want that trial held in Buffalo. Genron has not attended any of the court proceedings since last April. Solutions, not school suspensions. Parents, students, and advocates respond to the landmark agreement reforming discipline in the Buffalo Public Schools. Parent leaders, students, and community advocates gathered last Thursday in front of Lafayette High School to respond to the signing of a landmark assurance of discontinuance between the Buffalo Board of Education and the New York State Office of the Attorney General, Letitia James. The agreement follows an extensive civil rights investigation that found Buffalo Public Schools disproportionately disciplined Black and Latino students, students with disabilities, and English language learners, while frequently denying students and families due process protections. The press conference centered the voices and lived experience of parents and students who have been directly impacted by exclusionary and disproportionate discipline practices. 15 years ago, a young man was shot and killed after being suspended for something that he should not have been suspended for, said parent advocate Samuel Radford III. Since that day, we have committed ourselves as parents, students, and community that his death would not be in vain. His name was Jawan Daniels. Advocates reflected on the long history of community organizing that began in the wake of the 2010 suspension and death. Daniels has continued to fight for freedom and justice for more than 15 years. This agreement represents the result of sustained advocacy by families who refuse to accept policies that push children out of school and into harm's way, continued Radford. Today is about accountability, healing, and making sure that these reforms are implemented with fidelity. The Attorney General's investigation found that Black and Latino students were suspended at significantly higher rates than white students. Students with disabilities lost far more instructional time than their peers. Families were often denied adequate notice, fair hearings, and language access. Some students were improperly sent home without formal documentation. Under the agreement, among other things, the Buffalo Public Schools must, 1, appoint an independent monitor for at least 4 years. 2, establish a discipline ombudsman person. 3, revise the code of conduct. 4, expand restorative and preventative practices. 5, strengthen the due process protections. 6, improve language access and transparency. 7, enhance public discipline data reporting. 8, provide comprehensive staff training. And 9, a call for faithful implementation. Community leaders emphasize that while the agreement is historic, its success depends on faithful and transparent implementation. We have the framework for change, said Jessica Bauer Walker. Now we must ensure that these reforms are carried out in every school, every classroom, and for every child. Advocates called on district leadership, educators, and policymakers to work with families and students to ensure that discipline systems prioritize safety, dignity, and opportunity. The Buffalo Solutions Not Suspensions Coalition is a network of parents, students, educators, and community organizations working to end harmful disciplinary practices and promote restorative, equitable approaches to student behavior. Since 2014, the schools in Buffalo suspended as much as 13% of their student population each year, which by many accounts is excessive. This agreement is a long overdue response to years of advocacy. It recognizes that excessive and disproportionate discipline has damaged trust, denied opportunity, and placed students at risk for far too long. Said parent advocate Samuel Radford III, I want to thank the New York State Office of the Attorney General for listening to parents and community voices and for responding to long-standing concerns about student discipline. This process affirms that families deserve to be heard and that civil rights and student safety must remain central to educational policy. Every child deserves to feel safe and supported at school, and every family deserves to be heard and treated fairly. For too long, too many Buffalo students were denied that right. Today, we're taking a major step to bring accountability and justice to Buffalo Public Schools' disciplinary system. My office will continue working to ensure all New York students have an equal opportunity to learn and thrive, stated Attorney General James. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Challenger Community News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Black History. Jeers and threats. Young students walk through a crowd of angry racists as she and other blacks enter an all-white school after federal troops and National Guard stood by to protect them. Student vanguards in the Civil Rights Movement. September 1957. Little Rock, Arkansas. 9 black students were blocked from entering an all-white Central High School on the orders of Governor Orville Faubus. President Eisenhower sent the federal troops and the National Guard to intervene on behalf of the students, who became known as the Little Rock Nine. February 1960, Greensboro, North Carolina. 4 black students from North Carolina A&T College began a sit-in to desegregate a Woolworth's lunch counter. The event triggered many similar nonviolent protests throughout the South. Student sit-ins would be effective throughout the Deep South in integrating the parks, swimming pools, theaters, libraries, and other public facilities. April 1960, Raleigh, North Carolina. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, is founded at Shaw University, providing young blacks with a place in the civil rights movement. SNCC later grew into a more radical organization under the leadership of Stokely Carmichael, later known as Kwame Ture, who coined the phrase Black Power. In May of 1961, over the spring and summer, student volunteers began taking bus trips through the South to test out new laws that prohibited segregation in interstate travel facilities, which included bus and railway stations. Several of the groups of Freedom Riders, as they were called, were attacked by angry mobs along the way. The program, sponsored by the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, involved more than 1,000 volunteers, black and white. October 1962, James Meredith became the first black student to enroll at the University of Mississippi. Violence and riots surrounded the incident that caused President Kennedy to send the 5,000 federal troops. May 1963. The 1963 Birmingham Children's Crusade was a pivotal civil rights protest, where over 1,000 black students in Birmingham, Alabama, skipped school from May 2nd to the 10th to march against segregation. The youth faced brutal police brutality, including dogs and water cannons, resulting in mass arrests, which garnered national media attention and forced desegregation. September 1963, Birmingham, Alabama. 4 young girls, Denise McNair, Cynthia Wellesley, Cale Robertson, and Eddie Mae Collins, attending Sunday school, are killed when a bomb exploded at the 16th Street Baptist Church, a popular location for civil rights meetings. Riots then erupted in Birmingham, leading to the deaths of 2 more black youths. August 1964, Neshoba Country, Mississippi. The bodies of 3 civil rights workers, 2 white, 1 black, are found in the earthen dam 6 weeks into a federal investigation backed by President Johnson. James Chaney, who was 21, Andrew Goodman, who was 21, and Michael Schwerner, who was 24, had been working to register black voters in Mississippi, and on June 21st had gone to investigate the burning of a black church. They were arrested by the police on speeding charges, incarcerated for several hours, and then released after dark into the hands of the Ku Klux Klan, who murdered them. Induction of Reverend Jason Haynes at the historical BME Church. St. Catharines, Canada. Cold 15-degree winter weather did not stop folks from attending the induction of the Reverend Jason Haynes on February 8, 2026, as the new pastor of Zion Baptist Church, located at 25 Raymond Street, St. Catharines, Canada. Former pastor Carvin E. Washington Sr. served in the position for 29 years and was proud to pass the torch to Reverend Haynes. I charge you, I encourage you to preach the word and stick with the word, said former pastor Washington Sr., who recently celebrated his 95th birthday. The ceremony was held at the historical landmark Salem Chapel British Methodist Episcopal Church, located at 92 Geneva Street. Underground Railroad conductor Harriet Tubman attended this church, along with several others who sought freedom from slavery in the United States. I just want to thank the Lord first because he ordained this to be so, said new Pastor Haynes. He also thanked former Pastor Washington Sr. for mentoring him. Among many attendees and dignitaries were Reverend Haynes' parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jerome and Terry Haynes, his first wife, First Lady Marlise, and daughters Elena and Jasmine. Jesse Jackson, a Black History farewell to a civil rights warrior. Lived from October 8, 1941 to February 17, 2026. Born in segregated South Carolina, Jesse Jackson cut his teeth as an activist in college, where he joined the civil rights movement during his college years at North Carolina A&T State University in the early 1960s. He was a transformational figure in American history, a civil rights icon who made his reputation as a young man in the Jim Crow South, tutored by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself. A veteran of sit-ins and marches, he ran 2 groundbreaking presidential campaigns in 1984 and 1988, built on multiracial cultural coalitions and centering messages of hope and inclusion that garnered 7 million votes and paved the way for former President Barack Obama's historic 2008 run. A skilled community organizer, charismatic politician, and gifted orator who never lost his South Carolina drawl, the Reverend Jesse Jackson was as determined in his advocacy for the rights of Palestinians in Gaza and economic security for coal miners in West Virginia as he was to help residents of forgotten black neighborhoods in Chicago, his adopted hometown. Yet Jackson, whose work transcended seemingly rigid social, political, and religious boundaries, was at heart an African Methodist Episcopal preacher called upon by God to minister to his flock. Well into his later years, long after leaving the global stage, those who knew him say that Jackson remained faithful to that calling, visiting churches in Chicago and praying with parishioners from his wheelchair. The Right Reverend Frank M. Reed, retired AME bishop, recalls the last time that he saw Jackson. It was at the 92nd birthday celebration of Minister Louis Farrakhan, the former leader of the Nation of Islam, Reed says. To see those two giants sitting together, both in wheelchairs, but alive, it was a great moment because it speaks of Dr. King, his connection to Jesse, and it speaks to the honorable men themselves, Reed said. And it shows us that whatever our religious titles or our preferences or non-preferences may be, if we're in the struggle, we're all in it together. A relentless advocate who fought for social justice as a college student, Jackson, 84, died last Tuesday after a long illness, according to his family. Though the details of his death were not specified, Jackson had spent a decade battling progressive supranuclear palsy, a rare progressive neurological disorder. Reed said it was fitting that Jackson, who was a titanic civil rights figure, died during Black History Month. This David, named Jesse, Black Buffalo's recollection of Jesse Jackson. In 1977, 7 years before he made his first historic run for the President of the United States in 1984, the Reverend Jesse Jackson came to Buffalo to campaign for Arthur O. Eve after Eve's history-making primary election win for mayor of the city of Buffalo. Speaking to a standing room only crowd at St. John Baptist Church, then pastored by his close friend and mentor, Reverend B.W. Smith, Jackson was introduced by Reverend Smith as our David, referring to the biblical David and Goliath. This David named Jesse has gone out into the valley, and he has met the Goliath of racial prejudice, the Goliath of housing discrimination, the Goliath of inadequate public education, and each time has slain those Goliaths, and today he stands head and shoulders above every civil rights leader there is. Roger Blackwell, former Democratic chairman of the Erie County Legislature, whose political career spanned at least 3 decades, remembered those days well. They were times marked by activism, coalitions, activity, pride, and all eyes were on the prize. Blackwell also recalled Jackson coming to Buffalo to help Judge Wilbur Trammell in his campaign for mayor. Several years later, when Jackson announced his first run for president in 1984 and in 1988, he returned to campaign for himself. Jesse's closest ally was B.W. Smith, Blackwell recalled. Reverend Smith was chair of board of Jackson's Operation Push in Buffalo and served on the Operation Push National Board. Arthur Eve was the political entity. We did a whole lot of work. It was a very good experience for us. We had never been that close to anyone that high on the political scale with the skills that Jesse had. The black leadership, he said, was solidly behind Jackson's campaigns. Leaders such as William Gator and the whole BUILD organization, George K. Arthur, Reverend Herbert Reed, Dave Collins, Horace Billy Johnson, King Peterson, Ted Kirkland, and many more. It was an awesome time only because we felt we didn't have anything to lose, because what we did have was the black vote, and that vote was our bargaining chip, and Art was the master of that. In Blackwell's opinion, Jackson left a legacy of fearlessness, and he would encourage us was not to be afraid to challenge the system. You have to challenge the system, he urged. Jesse represented I can. He didn't represent I can't. That message is especially important for our young newly elected officials and those up-and-coming leaders in these challenging times, continued Blackwell. Jesse would say, you've got to be willing to take the challenge, learn the system, ask the questions, and not be afraid to make a move. Reverend Jackson also came here in 1980 to lend his support to a terrorized black community during the racist .22 caliber racially motivated killings, which took the lives of 4 black men, 2 who had their hearts cut out. After the May 14, 2022 racially charged massacre of 10 black people at Tops Market on Jefferson Avenue, he penned a powerful op-ed in the Chicago Times about the killings. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the February 19th, 2026 issue of the Challenger Community News. We read from the Challenger Community News every Saturday at 8:30 a.m. Your reader has been Jeff Shapiro. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the Batavia Daily News. Following that at 10 o'clock is the East Aurora Advertiser, and at 11 we have the Niagara Gazette. Stay with us for these readings and more throughout the day. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings of printed matter to our listeners who are blind or have a print disability throughout Western New York and Southern Ontario's Niagara Peninsula. The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service has brought nearly 40 years and more than 300,000 hours of radio readings to those without sight. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. For more information, call us at 716-821-5555. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Well, hello there. This is Lori Morose, and for the next hour, I will be reading from the dailynews.com, serving Genesee, Wyoming, and Orleans County, Tuesday, February 24th, 2026. Batavia Daily News, a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The first article we'll cover is Woman Accuses State of Sex Assault Cover-Up. New York State Focus tracks down former Groveland prison employee. Written by Chris Giraldi.